Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. This happened just a few months back in spring, during that odd transitional period of my life. I had just graduated, wasn't working yet, and had way too much time on my hands. I'd finished school a semester early, which sounded amazing when I was buried in deadlines, but once I was free, I had no clue how to fill my days. My full-time job didn't start until June. Most of my friends were still stuck with exams, and I was left drifting, stuck between two phases of life. Honestly, it made me restless and useless. I'm the kind of person who needs to stay busy, and doing nothing for days was unbearable. That is probably why I agreed so quickly when my mom asked me to check on my Uncle Rick's beach house. All I had to do was drive to Rehoboth Beach, look around, make sure there were no leaks or damage, and do some light maintenance so Rick wouldn't have to hire someone. For context, I live in Pennsylvania, and Rick's place is in Delaware, only about a 2-hour drive. Rick's house is massive, big enough to host my entire extended family every summer. Around 25 of us crammed in one place, drinking and playing endless games. The house isn't directly on the shoreline, but not far either, tucked into a quiet neighborhood full of tall beach grass and curving roads. Fast forward to some random weekday, maybe Thursday. I left later in the afternoon. Not the smartest idea in hindsight. The drive was smooth, and when I arrived, everything looked normal. I ran through Rick's checklist, checked the faucets, tested the breakers, walked the yard. All fine. But being there alone felt wrong. I'd never seen that house without noisy relatives everywhere, without board games scattered across tables, without music or chatter. The silence made the place feel abandoned. It got late, and since I hate driving at night, I texted my mom to say I'd stay over and head back in the morning. She thought it was smart and told me to thank Rick for letting me crash there, which I did. I made myself some food, scrolled on my phone, and then started getting ready for bed. During family trips, I always ended up in one of the smaller third-floor bedrooms while others claimed the nicer ones. But this time, with the house to myself, I decided to enjoy the master bedroom on the second floor. It had a private bathroom, a huge walk-in closet, and the comfiest bed in the house. No brainer. I got in bed around midnight and fell asleep fast. I don't know what time I woke up, but something had jolted me awake. Groggy, I was certain I'd heard something in the closet, like an object falling. My heart sped up as I turned my head toward the closet. I could move, but my body didn't want to. I forced myself to shut my eyes, convincing myself to go back to sleep. I almost did, until I heard it again. A soft, muffled thump inside the closet. I cracked my eyes open just slightly, trying to tell myself it was my imagination. But I knew better. And then it hit me. This time, I actually couldn't move. True paralysis. I lay there, frozen, as the closet door creaked open. Through barely open eyes, I saw a dark figure step into the room. It stood motionless beside my bed, watching me. 20 seconds felt like hours. Then, without a word, it turned and walked away. I heard its footsteps, but instead of going downstairs, they creaked up to the third floor. My stomach twisted. The third floor had no way out. My brain screamed at me to act, but I was terrified. I didn't know if the intruder was armed. Eventually, I broke free of the paralysis, grabbed my phone and dialed 911 in the faintest whisper, telling them someone was in the house. I quietly locked the bedroom door and waited. The flashing red and blue lights came faster than I expected. Relief nearly floored me when I saw the police. They stormed inside, checking every room. I waited outside, but soon they came back with nothing. They insisted whoever it was had slipped past me, but I knew what I'd heard. Uncle Rick wasn't having it. He demanded they check again, and this time I followed them. They searched thoroughly, opening every closet, checking under beds, tapping on walls, pulling back shower curtains, double-checking every lock. He was bald, filthy in ragged clothes with the look of someone who hadn't showered in years. The police got him down and cuffed within an hour. They said he was likely homeless, squatting in the house for days or longer. But he wouldn't answer questions. Not how he got in, not why he hid in the closet, not how long he'd been there. Just that blank, empty stare. He was taken away in a patrol car, and that was the end of it. But the memory lingers. I keep thinking about it. How he chose the closet, why he stood there silently, how he got onto the roof. And most of all, the chilling thought that if I'd slept in my usual third-floor room, things might have ended very differently. My friend Mike owns a beach house on the Jersey Shore. Calling it nice doesn't even scratch the surface. To me, it feels incredible. I didn't grow up with much, so maybe that's why it hits me differently, but it's the kind of place you imagine in magazines. It's not my family's home, so I don't know its full backstory, but from what Mike's told me, it's been in his family for generations. His grandparents had even tried making it their permanent home for years, but they both passed away recently. With no one living there full-time anymore, the place sits empty most of the year. Mike's extended family mostly lives on the West Coast, and his parents are too busy to make use of it. The silver lining to all this is that Mike pretty much has free access whenever he wants. I'm sure his dad had plans to rent it out for extra income, but finding tenants for an off-season beach house isn't easy. In mid-July, Mike texted me out of the blue, asking if I wanted to come down for the weekend. He didn't have to ask twice. I had nothing on my plate, and the thought of relaxing at a beach house, especially one this nice, was a no-brainer. His plan was simple: hang out, hit the beach during the day, and stroll the boardwalk at night. Nothing wild, just a laid-back escape. We live near each other, so Mike picked me up Friday afternoon. I threw a duffel bag in his trunk, and off we went. We rolled up around 6 p.m., dropped our stuff upstairs, and settled in. It was more about being out there. At one point, we ran into two girls about our age walking along the shore. Mike, being Mike, struck up a conversation. They were semi-local, and the whole interaction had that casual, low-stakes beach night vibe. We got their numbers and went our separate ways. Even though it was peak season and there were plenty of people out, Mike knew the quiet pockets, private paths, tucked-away dunes, little stretches between houses where the streetlights faded. We ended up on a secluded bit of sand where only the waves and the wind kept us company. Nights like that make you forget about real life. That evening, Mike suggested hitting some bars in Seaside, but after a long day in the sun, neither of us had the energy. The thought of lines and loud music felt exhausting. We ended up going to bed early. Sometime after midnight, a shrill, piercing beeping yanked me out of sleep. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but the sound cut through the dark, high-pitched, like a smoke alarm. I jumped up, scanning the room, but it wasn't coming from anywhere on the second floor. Listening carefully, I realized it was above me. I ran to Mike's room, shook him awake, and told him to follow me. Half asleep, shirtless, he got up without a word. Together we raced up to the third floor, not knowing what to expect. The hallway was mostly dark, moonlight spilling in through a window at the far end. We flipped on the lights. No smoke, no fire, nothing. Just that relentless beeping. After several confusing minutes of searching, I found it. In one of the bedrooms, neatly tucked under a pillow, was a small black device. Before calling Mike over, I picked it up out of sheer curiosity. Who would hide something like that in their own home anyway? Maybe it was some kind of makeshift smoke detector, but there was no fire. And the worst part, the only way it could have been triggered was by hand. That's when it clicked. I flicked the switch again. The beeping started, then stopped when I flicked it off. Mike's face went pale. We both realized it at the same time. Someone else had been in the house. We didn't waste a second. Mike dialed the police while I locked and barricaded the door. We sat in the dark, hearts pounding, until the flashing lights finally showed up. Per the officer's instructions, we went downstairs while they searched the house. When they returned, their faces were grim. It felt like we were losing our minds, but escorted upstairs by the officers, we couldn't deny it. Someone had been there. They didn't find anyone. No prints, no weapons, nothing. After about 20 minutes, they told us to lock all the windows and call again if anything else happened. Then they left. Mike and I didn't feel safe, but we had no choice but to stay the night and leave first thing in the morning. Thankfully, nothing else happened. But there are parts of that night I still can't explain. And for all we know, whoever had been in that house might never have left. I knew myself well enough to expect that after 3 days of non-stop company, I'd start to feel a little irritable. But surprisingly, things were going smoothly. And though I usually keep things low-key, if there was ever a time to loosen up, this was it. We kicked the evening off by heading down to the private beach. The four of us sat in the sand with our drinks, playing music off Sabrina's speaker, laughing and stargazing. At some point, we noticed a faint flickering light farther down the shoreline. At first, it just looked like a strange glow. Then we realized it was swinging back and forth, a flashlight in someone's hand. Soon we could make out figures moving closer, maybe 3 or 4 people. We all tensed a little until we heard laughter floating down the beach, which eased our nerves. Probably just other young people out for a late-night walk. The guys weren't overly flirty, but they were entertaining and time slipped by. Eventually, they invited us back to where they were staying. I was wiped out and had zero interest in hooking up, so I politely bowed out. My 3 friends, however, clearly wanted to keep the night going, so I let them go. There were 3 of them and 3 guys. It felt balanced enough. I walked back to the house, showered, and crawled into bed. I pulled over and watched in shock as officers surrounded the car, weapons drawn. They yanked all 3 men out, cuffed them, and shoved them into patrol cars. Then an officer popped the trunk. Inside were Thea and Sabrina, tied up, bruised, and terrified. That image is burned into my mind. But what they went through was far worse than what I saw. They gave me permission to share this, but neither of them has ever wanted to write it down themselves. She left, but halfway home realized she had forgotten her purse. When she turned back, that's when she saw the men forcing Thea and Sabrina into the SUV. She called the police immediately, and then me. Later, we learned that the house the men had been staying in wasn't theirs at all. It belonged to an older couple who were out of the country. On top of that, the men were charged with multiple other crimes.